Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Same Old Arsenal podcast. I hope you're all doing very, very well. We are proudly sponsored by Ruth Beck Art, and I mentioned this right at the start, just so all of you can see the new fabulous creation she's got in these gonks. Now, I think they've been on sale for a little while, actually, but it's coming up to Christmas. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I mean, look at them. If you want to get a unique, bespoke, personalized present, that's going to be absolutely perfect. Not to mention, she's still got her Christmas cards on sale, which you can see there, and they look absolutely fabulous as a nice little gift. And make sure you check her out on Etsy and Redbubble. And apologies for those of you listening who have no doubt sat for about a minute and a half of adverts only to be greeted by a sponsor message. But look, I've done it in a minute. Ruth, I hope that's okay for you. But make sure you go and check her out. Her stuff is absolutely fantastic, and she's a brilliant Arsenal supporter. But I'm joined today by another fantastic Arsenal supporter who's very clued up on our opposition this Wednesday. Alan, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, good to see you, Cookie. It's great to be with you.
Lovely stuff, mate. So before we get into the weekend, well, I say the weekend, Wednesday, how was the weekend for you? I mean, it was a brilliant game on Saturday. Routine stuff. We've not really been treated to that often in recent years.
We've not, and I was putting together my online Gooner column and realised that on the very same weekend, the year previous, we actually did do exactly the same thing. We beat Nottingham Forest 5-0, exactly the same weekend, exactly the same game week in the Premier League, exactly the same scoreline, almost similar XG, and we were 1-0 up at half-time. But I think one of the interesting things about it was only 4 players started the game last year that started the game this year. So it shows a bit of an evolution in the squad because only one of them has actually left the club. So they would have all been available barring injuries and Arteta deciding to rest players. And it shows a real evolution in the squad that with Granit Xhaka missing, the only one missing, the other players that didn't play were either rested or injured, but they still managed to step up through the squad and achieve a similar result. I don't think Sheffield United are of the quality of Forest that Forest were last season, but obviously, you know, Forest were still in the bottom 5. So, I mean, Sheffield United would do well to finish anywhere out of the bottom 1 at the moment, based on the evidence of the weekend. One of the lowest XGs ever, 0.03 for a long shot that just hit someone's legs and went out. A terrible performance from them, but it's so good to see the squad evolve over that course of a year.
Yeah, and that's a really good point you make there about, so many different players, because it really doesn't feel like that many, to be honest, because you look at the squad now and how it has evolved. But I suppose, we had mainstays in the team last year. I mean, Gabriel and Erdegaard, I presume they're 2 guys that started that game at Forest. But
Yeah.
it's so nice to be in a position now where we've got, Emil Smith-Rowe, Kai Havertz, Jakub Kiwior, even Eddie Nketiah that comes in, and the level of the team doesn't drop, and we're still able to dispatch Premier League opposition by 5 goals. And you're right in saying Sheffield United were absolutely dreadful, probably one of the worst teams I've ever seen come to the Emirates Stadium. I mean, worth caveating that they did have quite a lot of injuries, but even so, like, everything about their performance was so poor. But look, we're not here to talk about the weekend. We're here to look ahead to our game in the Carabao Cup away at the London Stadium. Firstly, before we go into who we're playing, mate, the Carabao Cup, I mean, it's a competition that, it's chalk and cheese amongst fans. I would personally love to see us go on and win it, because I think we've got a squad that is now deep enough to take this competition. I'm not going to say completely seriously, but to a more serious extent that we have done in previous years. And it can be a catalyst for going on to win the Premier League title. We've seen that done in years gone by. And I think, given the depth we've got, it would be silly to chuck this. So first of all, how are you feeling about the tournament? What's your kind of opinion on it?
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to just call it the League Cup. And, winning it in 1987 led to 5 titles in the next 16 years. Now, there are people out there that might not believe that it was a catalyst. They might believe that it was only a small one. Some people might not believe it was one at all. I believe it was at least a medium to big catalyst in this club turning things around from the darker days of the early 80s. Now, I mean, you certainly won't remember that, but there are a lot of fans out there that knew that George Graham just winning that trophy against an amazing Liverpool team at Wembley, the first time that Ian Rush had scored and Liverpool had lost the game. All those stats were thrown out. And believe you me, that led to that squad having belief and knowing that they could challenge for the title and go and win at Anfield in '89. And obviously what was left behind was taken a few steps further by Arsene Wenger to win, 3 titles in his first 10 years. So, yeah, across the next 16 years, we won 5 titles, which, is sort of disappointingly unthinkable at the moment. If you said in the next 16 years we'd win 3, I think most people would be happy. 2, possibly even 1. We're on the longest run ever post-war without a title, and it needs to end somehow, and it could end with a catalyst of a trophy. Now, the League Cup, it isn't taken as seriously anymore. But look, there was Europe around then, albeit with a ban on English clubs. But, it was taken seriously even when those clubs could qualify for Europe in the early 80s. And, I think Liverpool won a treble that did include the European Cup, League Cup and the title back in the early 80s, and certainly took it seriously. So I think if we can, it is a great way to keep interested members of the squad around and lift the first trophy of the season. The fact that Manchester City take it seriously is obviously mainly to do with the fact they have the riches to be able to have a decent enough second string, and that's sort of how they've won it in recent years. But they still enjoy winning it. You can still see that they take it seriously as a trophy. And I think Mikel Arteta needs to do that. Last season against Brighton, I think that was the only real big blot on the copybook last season, was how badly they played in that game and how they didn't take it seriously. And that felt a bit wrong, just mainly because when we have a home tie in this competition, it's the chance for a lot of Gooners to actually be at the stadium for a rare occasion. And I just think he sort of disrespected it last year. I was surprised at the team we put out at Brentford. I think it, if you look back at that team, it did include some strong players, 4 or 5 that would probably be starting players for us. So I think we've got the riches to actually go and take it seriously against West Ham tomorrow night.
Yeah, me too. And if you consider someone like Leandro Trossard didn't even start that game at the weekend. He didn't even start the game against Sevilla. So someone like him, you would think is a no-brainer to come into a match like this. And he's still a player that could quite easily start a Premier League fixture for us. I don't think we'd have any questions about that. So if we're able to just sensibly rotate, maybe not to, go as strong as we have done in the Champions League games, but if we were to make 5-6 changes and still keep some of the mainstays in there, I think that would be the right way to go about this. But if you look at the opposition that are in the League Cup as a whole, I mean, City are out of it. Liverpool is still in it. You've got United in there. You've got Chelsea, Newcastle. But Spurs are out as well, who are obviously top of the tree, and we've got to take them with a degree of seriousness. But there's a real chance for us to have a bit of not a free run, but a really good chance of winning this trophy, isn't there?
Yeah, if we win the tie tomorrow, I think it really opens up in the last 8. And I think there are no teams in there that you would fear. I mean, there are teams in there that you would respect. And unfortunately, yes, Tottenham do come under that category at the moment. I'm going to say at the moment because I'm not entirely sure they'll keep it going. But I think, you've got Liverpool in there, but I think they're slightly distracted at the moment. And their rebuild means that they're not as strong in their second string. So it depends on how far Jurgen Klopp takes it. Well, I think we're a year further on than them, 2 years further on, maybe 3 than Man United. So it's probably only really Tottenham. And imagine that, a North London derby in a final. That would be something. So
Tottenham are out, mate. Tottenham are out.
Oh, sorry. I'm going mad. I actually do think that playing Liverpool in the final is a repeat of 87 would be incredible. So, I mean, we're taking United at face value at the moment. Their second string, I don't think. I mean, their first string's not up to scratch at the moment. So, I just think between Liverpool and Manchester United, it has opened up.
And not to mention, Man United are playing Newcastle in the next round. So, I mean, it's a very real opportunity that they could lose that game. It is at Old Trafford, as they seem to get all of their cup ties at home, which is absolutely infuriating. But I think, honestly, looking at all the teams in there, I would feel very confident going up against each and every one of them. You know, if we got to the semis or the final and we were in a position to play a stronger team, I really do think we could go all the way. And whilst we're in that position, whilst there is no City, there is no informed Spurs in the hat, we should really make a go at this. But it's not going to be easy tomorrow night, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. I saw one of your tweets earlier with one of our listeners that you don't expect West Ham to go all that strong. You expect to see the likes of Mavropanos, Danny Ings, and co in the team. Is that still your feeling?
It is, and I'd go even stronger to say that I attended the London Stadium on Sunday. So the 4 Premier League teams that I actually saw at the weekend, West Ham's performance wasn't far off Sheffield United's at the Emirates on Saturday. I mean that, and that will be backed up by their fans. They were poor. They were really poor. Now, I was saying ahead of that game to a few West Ham fans at the stadium and people that I speak to, they very rarely chuck in 2 to 3 games on the trot that have been poor, especially under David Moyes. They usually have a cup game that just sparks them out of it, and they don't tend to go into a huge lull. But at the moment, they're on a 3-game losing run that I think it's only two of 6 in the Premier League as well. And they just don't look right at the moment. And they were saying some bizarre things about being better off without Declan Rice. And from what I saw on Sunday, I mean, it was a silly thing for them to say anyway. They just got a bit carried away with some results at the start of the season that went their way. And they were playing all right at the start of the season. They were playing all right. But now that luck has turned, they look a bit laboured and they just look... I mean, Everton just let them have the ball at the weekend and said, what do you want to do with it? And that is the worst case scenario for West Ham. It has been under David Moyes. Whenever a team gives them the ball and says, go on, play through us, do something, have as much possession as you like, they tend to falter a little bit. And they won at Luton at the start of the season, but they actually lost on XG to Luton. They're one of the only few teams to have lost on XG to Luton. And that was mainly because of the same thing. Luton were huge underdogs. West Ham went there as favourites and they had lots of the ball and they really struggled. I don't think that's going to happen against us, regardless of the team that we put out. I really don't think that we will be what you would call a weak squad. I think we'll rest players, but it will still look strong because the squad's strong. And that's what I was talking about, the evolution of the squad, that we could put out a decent team tomorrow. I wonder if Moyes will really want to stop the rot because it's a London derby, it's a home game. The tickets have been reduced, which I think is fantastic from both clubs. So it should be a packed house. He needs something now. And I just feel that although the players that I mentioned earlier will come in, I think that he will go strong in other areas. So, I mean, they're not poor players. I mean, talking about Fabianski going in goal, just because Areola's done fantastically well to claim the first shirt there, and Fabianski hasn't been getting as much games. Similar situation to us, really, where they had, well, if you believe Mikel Arteta, they have 2 keepers where they do it as a meritocracy, and they just tend to swap around depending on who's in form, which means Fabianski should come in for the cup games as he has been. They played away at Lincoln in the previous round and he came in. We'll expect to see Aaron Ramsdale. So I don't think there's any drop off from either team in terms of the keepers, but Mavropanos at the back for West Ham, he played in the previous round. Ben Johnson hasn't been getting games. I expect him to come in. I do wonder about Ben Rama because the West Ham fans always clamour for him to start. And when he does, he tends not to deliver. He's sort of more of an impact player. But at the weekend, he came on and he looked quite disinterested. So I wonder if he'll try and spark him into life by starting him. Look, they have a strong squad. It's a strong Premier League squad. I would expect them to match us up. And I would generally agree that we should be slight favourites to win tomorrow.
Your knowledge on West Ham ceases to amaze me. That was fantastic stuff there. What do you make of a player like Mavropanos? Because he's obviously someone that we previously had on our books. I've still got nightmares of when he played against Crystal Palace in that team that featured the likes of Guendouzi, Elneny, Carl Jenkinson, the fall of the Unai Emery era, if you like. But he seems to have gone on, had a very good spell in the Bundesliga, and he's got a big-ish money move to West Ham United. I think there's quite a lot of expectation on his shoulders. But from what I've seen of him, I watched him against Olympiacos last week. I thought he looked very, very unsure of himself.
He does, and I think that's mainly to do with the fact that he's not been really getting the game time, apart from their sort of, as you say, the Europa League and their League Cup game away at Lincoln. He's a goal threat. I mean, he gets up to corners, and they tend to aim for him, especially if Zuma's not in the team. They tend to aim for him at corners, and they've got quite a decent set piece delivery. But you're right, he doesn't look assured of himself at the back. I sometimes give centre-backs that kind of excuse that if you're not playing in a settled 2 or 4 across the back, it sometimes is difficult to get to know your place, know what you should be doing at any one time. And they've really swapped around their centre-backs this season with Zuma, Ogbonna, and Mavropanos. And they've even been putting Thilo Kehrer at the back in a more central position, even though for Germany plays out wide. Gerd sometimes comes in at the back as well. So, I mean, there's sort of 6 you could choose from. I would expect Emerson to come back in for them. He's usually a first choice player for them, but he was suspended at the weekend for the Everton game. And unfortunately, Aaron Cresswell, as much as I've loved him sort of in that left back position, he's getting on a bit now, and I would hope from an Arsenal point of view that they play him, because if we put a quick winger on him, if we maybe give Reece Nelson a start, I would expect someone to have a lot of joy against Cresswell. But I would feel, just because Emerson missed the game at the weekend, David Moyes will be rushing him back to overcome that suspension. So do you know what? I think it'd be a really balanced game where we'll just have a little bit more quality than they have, especially in the final third. I thought it was an interesting debate to say whether or not, if Jesus' injury is that bad, would we risk Nketiah? I mean, it seems like a bizarre question, seeing as I think this is his tournament. This is his tournament for starts going back sort of 8 years, isn't it? But is this where we actually say we need Nketiah for the Newcastle game? If Jesus can't be ready, if he picks up an injury, we've got no one. I mean, absolutely no one to fill that hole.
It's concerning, isn't it, with not with Jesus and Partey in particular, because the noises coming out of Colney this morning, just he didn't give a timeline on Jesus, and he just said with Partey we're looking at weeks, and what does that mean? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? How many weeks could that potentially be? Hopefully, it's nothing serious to either of them. I feel like Jesus might be back a little bit sooner than I think some of us are fearing. I don't think he'll make the Newcastle game, but if we're looking at one after that, I think he'll be back at that point. But it is frustrating. I don't want to start looking at Newcastle, but if you had Partey and Jesus going into that game, I think I'd feel a bit more confident about us going there and getting a win. But look, it's West Ham on Wednesday, and we've got a comment in the chat room here from Emerson Cozier. Do you agree that at least 2 academy players should be on the bench tomorrow? Who would you like to see? It's an interesting question, because we saw Segore Jr. Start in the last rounds at Brentford. Certainly someone that I had no indication whatsoever that he would start. I'd barely heard of the kid before he appeared on the team sheet. But obviously we've got, plenty of youth team players that we can choose from that are just blowing it up at the minute. So is there anyone that you think could be in line for a start or could be on the bench?
It'll be interesting to see, because the weekend game, Cozier Dewberry, I think you might have seen the goal. I mean, it's a great goal scored at the North Bank end at Boreham Wood, just down the road from me. He was on the bench for the previous game. I'm just wondering if he will start one, and obviously Sego Jr. Played in the game. I mean, I was looking at the bench. So Sweet and Walters were also on the bench. So there were 4 what you would call academy players involved in that game. I wouldn't go too far with that because I don't believe that West Ham will go. They'll dip into players that we've all heard of. We know they're just on the fringes of their squad. There won't be unknowns in that West Ham squad. And whereas I do think we got the quality, I think the more you force this on junior players, they tend to get, and it's more to do with the savviness of actually knowing how to play against Premier League oppositions, it's not to do with quality. And I think we've seen many times down the years when we haven't had a strong backup squad, where we've thrown lots of academy players onto the pitch, it hasn't tended to work because they're just not savvy enough to deal with a dyed-in-the-wall Premier League centre-back that's at the end of his career that can just, casually marshal you out of the way and deal with that kind of threat or be as organised at the back. So I wouldn't go too far, but I would expect Cozy Ajubri and Sago Jr. to get onto the pitch tomorrow, even if it's not from a start.
Yeah, I think in this game, I really liked what we did in the previous round with just having one guy in the team and the rest kind of being all names that we'd heard of, all guys that you would assume could play quite comfortably in a Premier League game. I thought that was a really nice environment because, like you say, I remember going back 10, 15 years to the Arsene Wenger era where you would have, Justin Hoyt, Francis Coquelin, a really young Kieran Gibbs starting in the League Cup, and it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't good enough. And even in those later rounds, like we're talking quarterfinals, occasionally semi-finals, you'd still see really, really young, weakened teams, which I think, gave you an indication of how Arsene Wenger perceived the tournament. But even so, we've got the squad to now deal with this. Like I say, we've got Trossard, Smith Rowe, Havertz. A lot of the players that ended the game, I think, at the weekend are ones that could potentially start this one on Wednesday. It was almost like a League Cup sort of 11 that finished the game. And there's a lot of players that I think need minutes. Trossard definitely won. Fabio Vieira, he scored his penalty at the weekend. He's got to be in line to start this game. Before, I suppose actually we may as well just go straight into it, Alan. What would be your preferred starting 11 for this game?
Well, I'll just follow on your point because I've got this funny feeling Mikel Arteta at the weekend was so disappointed that Sheffield United didn't give us a test. Because I'll tell you what happened. I was lucky enough to have access to a box at the weekend. So I went up there for a drink as the crowds left the stadium. So I was one of the last people left in the Emirates on Saturday after the game. And I watched one of the most intense warm downs you will ever see from a group of subs and benched players. I mean, Aaron Ramsdale did a good sort of 20-30 minute goalkeeping session, and then the rest of the players that had played either as sub or had come off the pitch, so those players that had not done the full 90, so there's maybe about 12 of them, they all went into a six-a-side with big goals on one half of the pitch and played an intense six-a-side game that was really competitive. It was actually great to watch. The only one who didn't was Ødegaard, and I know he's carrying a knock, so I think that sort of was why he was on the bench at the weekend. And I'm wondering if that really is the sort of team that we will see will be made up of those players. So I would expect to see, I think Aaron Ramsdale is almost a certainty to be in goal. The right back and left back, I think is difficult at the moment because we're not exactly blessed because of the departures and injuries there.
Would you give Cedric a start?
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. But I sort of have a fear that maybe he will get into the team. But I would go with any combination of the two that we would see at Newcastle. Really, I think is going to be exactly the case. I think it will be. White, Tomiyasu, or Zinchenko, and any one of those, any two of those three. I think across the back, it's strange that Kivior obviously came in at the weekend ahead of this game, but I still think he'll play this game as well. And I think you'll see Gabriel back, and I think Saliba will be the one getting the rest at the back. In the middle, I sort of think, and I know he didn't start, He came on as a sub against Brentford, but I think El Neni might actually a start. I think Jorginho will get a start alongside him. I think we'll see Havertz, Trossard, Nelson, and then I'm struggling for one more. I mean, will it be Nketiah? Maybe it will. Maybe he will be. Maybe he will take the risk.
Not Smith Rowe?
I think if you play Smith Rowe, then you've got to say to someone else that they've got to be the striker or even a false nine on the evening. And maybe that is set up for someone like Havertz to have a good game and know that he's not, up there feeding a Jesus or an Nketiah or sort of feeling like it. It was weird at the weekend because I'd say he had a comfortable game. He was almost like a wall pass for everyone to sort of get involved in the game up front. And because Sheffield United offered absolutely nothing, he was more like just a facilitator for everyone else to do stuff and people get forward. Now, some might have said, well, why didn't he show us what he could do? And this was levelled at Emil Smith Rowe as well. It was getting, his first start in a while. But look, Smith Rowe was on the edge of their box and it opened up like easy for him to have a long shot. And he passed the ball to Eddie and Eddie did exactly the same. I just think Smith Rowe and Havertz might suit more of a battle and they might get that tomorrow and you might see a bit more from them. They didn't have to be good at the weekend and they didn't have to do amazing things at the weekend, and that's probably why we didn't see many amazing things for them. So I just feel now we've got the squad that can take this seriously and go and win there tomorrow.
And we've got a great comment here from my regular preview buddy JJ. Hope you're getting well, JJ. Hope the kidney stones aren't causing you too many more problems. Ramsdale, White, Kivior, Gabriel, Zinchenko, Jorginho, Vieira, Smith Rowe, Nelson, Trossard, Havertz. I mean, that sounds like a very strong team on paper.
Yeah,
I think.
I
think
that's far off what I said. Apart from Vieira, El Neni, and maybe most people would like that. It's not. There's not much steel in there if they go a bit sort of tough in midfield with maybe like a Souček coming in. He came on at the weekend, which is weird. He'd usually be a first name on their team sheet. He likes a battle in the midfield. Bizarrely, there's loads of West Ham fans thinking they're going to be seeing Declan Rice tomorrow and buying tickets for that reason. Well, he wasn't even in the squad for our game at Brentford. He didn't even make the bench, did he?
No, he didn't, but I think he could make the bench in this game. I mean, if we're going to see a midfield like that, I would, like you, swap out Jorginho for El Neni just to give us a bit more steel. I mean, Jorginho, Vieira, Smith Rowe, that's too lightweight for me. You could make an argument that El Neni's not the most physical, but I think if you just want someone in there that's going to get about, win tackles, do the basics, but do them well, I'd have him at the base, and it just allows Vieira and Smith Rowe to do their thing a bit further up the pitch. And I think it's important as well that we see Smith Rowe playing that right-hand side instead of the left. I think that's where he started at the weekend. He just wasn't able to get forward as much as I would have liked. So for him to start in the right 8 in Ødegaard's position, I think that would be key for his game. But we've got a question here from Phil Macker. What players do you definitely hope are rested? I mean, Saka, like he puts there, is a no-brainer. But is there anyone else that springs to mind for you, Adam?
Well, definitely Dec. I think, and Saliba as well. I think Rice and Saliba should be rested. It's interesting you think that Rice will be on the bench. If we're sort of 2-0 up, 2 goals ahead in the game, and he comes on for a sort of 10-minute. It actually, now weirdly, in my mind, I think it would be good management if he can get him on the pitch tomorrow. And that contradicts what I've just said. But if the West Ham fans are going to have and by the way, the straw poll that I've taken amongst them is that he'll get a bit of stick, but mainly appreciation. So if we could get that out of the way before we go there in the league and play for bigger points, which I don't think is right until the end of the season. They come to us before similar time as last year around Christmas time. So if we can get him on the pitch for 10 minutes and just get out of the way his reintroduction to those fans, maybe that's a better environment than somewhere where we need him to start a game and it could be really sort of tough end of season, battling for points like we were last season when he obviously turned the game for the opposition. So I would like to see Rice, Saliba and Saka rested But if we can get Rice on the bench and maybe on for 10 minutes at the end for that reintroduction to those fans, and obviously while he's warming up, that might do us good later in the season.
So just touching on Declan Rice, I mean, we all know that it was I don't want to say hostile, but there was a very mixed reaction, I think, from West Ham fans, particularly from what I saw on social media. And, I live in a West Ham area, so I was kind of first-hand experiencing the Declan Rice saga unfold in front of my very eyes. But you would hope that they would treat him with respect. But like you say, at the start of the season, they were talking about how they don't need him. And I think that's kind of fallen by the wayside as the season's gone on. But what sort of reaction do you anticipate he will get going back to the London Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, Cookie, if someone took Arsenal fans for what we saw on social media from Arsenal fans, then we'd all have to hide in a cave, because obviously some of the fans that represent us on social media are shocking in their views. And it's funny. I mean, a Tottenham fan could be waxing lyrical about how amazing they are. I wouldn't reach for the mute or block button, but as soon as you get one of our fans that starts talking nonsense, it's usually that's when I'm reaching for the mute and block button. So look, I don't want to be taking West Ham fans at the face value of social media. There's a couple of accounts that have seemed to have stirred up some kind of rivalry between the two clubs that, apart from some horrific violence in the 80s, hasn't existed. That was a different time and a different set of fans that were doing those kind of things. Your match going Arsenal and West Ham fans, I would say, are very similar. As I've worked at the club for quite a while now through sponsorship, and most of their sensible fans say don't mind Arsenal, hate Chelsea and Tottenham. And I think it's a sort of similar thing that we have with them. So in reality, if he was going to go to a London club, this would be the best for them. They would have hated him to have gone to Chelsea. A lot of them would have preferred that he went to Manchester City, so it just sort of left the problem up there. But in general, that guy has carried that team for 3-4 years. And certainly last year, they were short as 2-1 for relegation at one point. He dragged them out of that, and he also dragged them to an amazing European final where he lifted silverware for them. So you're sensible West Ham fans, and believe me, that is the majority. It's not the online face of them. They will give him a good reception, albeit with, I think, a touch of what you would call sort of fan banter, terrace banter, rather than hostility.
Do you think there's a slight bit of envy that he didn't go to Man City? Because, I mean, you mentioned that would be the preferred destination. I mean, look, I can completely sympathise with West Ham fans in that regard. They want him to go to a completely almost neutral club where he's guaranteed to win things. And there was almost that debate on Twitter at the time. I mean, I remember in hindsight, it looks absolutely ridiculous, where they were almost celebrating the Man City bids as they came in. But, I mean, do you think that they feel that he's not really showing enough ambition by going to Arsenal? That was kind of the argument they made at the time, that by going to Arsenal, there's nothing guaranteed. You've got to work for it a bit more. And I would argue that shows even more ambition, that he wants to do what he's done with West Ham and kind of pull them out of the darkness to win a European trophy and to try and repeat that feat at I don't want to say a much bigger club, but obviously a bigger club like Arsenal, where we could potentially go on to win the Premier League with him being the guy that plays 30 out of 38 games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a decent steer on it very early on that he wasn't leaving London. So there were only realistically 2, maybe 3 clubs he could have gone to. There was a Bayern Munich bid somewhere. I mean, he was never going to go there. Never, ever going to go there. He was never going to go to City. There were some wild theories about City bidding just to make sure that the Arsenal bid sort of looked serious. But look, he wanted to come to Arsenal. I was on the show with obviously Anthony Gale, Dec's coach, and and this wasn't insider information at all. It was just pure information that he would be staying in London, and he really liked the Arsenal story. He bought into it. He watched the All or Nothing series. He bought into Mikel Arteta. He bought into what we were doing last year, and he knows, despite some idiots on social media, he knows that we are historically one of the biggest three clubs in the country. And I'm including United and Liverpool in that. The recent riches for teams like Chelsea and Manchester City, as we often say to their fans whenever they're with us or in the stadium with us, they don't buy you that history. They don't buy you that tradition. And the reason that a lot of West Ham fans wanted him to go to Man City is, as you've just said there, is because they feel a bit neutral. I mean, look, if Man City were playing Tottenham in a Champions League final, an FA Cup final, they're like the freebie team where you know they're good and you really don't care if they win it, but you really don't want the other team to win. It feels like they're just there. And albeit it was us last season that lost out to them, I think a lot of people, even Manchester United fans, would you believe, saw them as the neutral against the rival that we were back in the sort of 90s and early 2000s. So it's a really strange way that people are viewing Manchester City at the moment, as if, well, if they win it, it doesn't matter because it's better than our rivals winning it. And I think a lot of West Ham fans saw the Declan Rice transfer exactly like that.
It's brilliant point, mate. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's interesting. Like, if you're a young Arsenal fan growing up now, let's say you're 10 years old. I mean, you'll only really know Man City, and in that point, they've been, head and shoulders above where we've been. We've never really competed with them. But it'd be interesting if they have that same affiliation with City as, I mean, you're a bit older than me, but like, I've grown up with Manchester United winning the league again and again and again, and then Chelsea winning it, several times on the spin. And there was even a period where Liverpool were pretty decent, but never came close to winning it. I remember in 13-14 when Liverpool were fantastic, and when I had that team of Luis Suarez and John Flanagan at the back of all people, and they came very close. So it's those teams that I've always had an affiliation with, and obviously Spurs throwing them into the mix. But I completely agree with that sentiment that you say there. City, I don't have that hatred towards them. I don't have that fierce, burning desire for them to lose. I mean, it was weird watching the game against Man United because, okay, for us, you want Man United to maybe get something out of that game, but I didn't really feel anything when City went 3-0 up because I love seeing Man United lose, if I'm being totally honest with you. But look, I'm going off topic. Going into the game tomorrow, I mean, it sounds silly to say, but what would be a good outcome for Arsenal? I mean, I would like to see maybe a few more goals than what we got at Brentford, a bit more than just a 1-0, but, I think it will be a difficult game, like you say. Do you think this could be a game that we could maybe go on to win, by a couple of goals?
I actually, looking at my predictions this week, I've actually said that this might go to penalties. I can actually see like a 2-2 draw. I sort of feel that it could go a long way. I think we're capable. I think we're capable in terms of our squad, our second string squad, or sort of 1.5 string squad would be comfortable favourites against them and should beat them by a couple of goals. But I just feel the way that we'll approach this game, knowing that Newcastle at the weekend is the bigger prize, we might take our eye off the ball a little. And they haven't been playing well at the moment, but they do have individual quality, and you would expect a response from them. And I just see them scoring a couple. I think it'll be a really good game. I really do. I think it'll be an exciting game. And I would hope that Mikel Arteta would say to those players, go and grab a chance and express yourself as well. Because he sees it as a bit of a freebie. I know, we've got 4 competitions. We're fighting on 4 fronts. It is by far the 4th of those. By far. So I get it, but I really want to see them expressing themselves and playing football. And if we do that, I think we'll score a couple too.
You're completely right. And there are players that are going to be starting this game that need to get back into that starting 11. I mean, someone like Fabio Vieira, we got a glimpse of what he could do earlier on in the season. I mean, we're already in October, almost in November, but he really did have a positive start to the season. He even started the North London derby. Since then, he's kind of gone into the periphery again. And he's a player that I really don't want to kind of take one step forward, two steps back, because he's just not been in the team enough for my liking. I mean, he didn't get off the bench against Sevilla. He did come off the bench against Sheffield United, won the penalty, scored the penalty, credit to him. This is a game where he's really got to grasp the nettle. I really hope he has a point to prove. But one player that, I mean, is going to be on everyone's lips going into tomorrow is Aaron Ramsdale. I mean, I'm sure you've had your discussion on the goalkeeping situation already, but I think it's been, for me, it's been disappointing. It's not really been that much of a meritocracy at Arsenal. I would have expected Aaron Ramsdale to have played more games. I mean, since Raya has come in, he's only played one, and that was the game against Brentford. But he's too good of a keeper to be playing that little football. It's a given that he'll start tomorrow, I think. But what has he got to do tomorrow to give Arteta a bit of a headache going into the game against Newcastle?
I don't know. I think he could have a 10 out of 10 game. Arteta's extremely stubborn on things like this. I almost feel, and because there'll be a packed away end, I think it's nearly 6,000 tickets. And again, you've got to praise both clubs to come in for this £10 a ticket. And, that's great. I almost feel that the Arsenal fans won't be doing Ramsdale any favours if they really overreact to him tomorrow and start singing his name, because Arteta is just that, and it's what makes him good. It's a bad point, but it also makes him good. He'll see that as like almost a challenge to his authority, that we're all singing Ramsdale's name tomorrow and going mad because we're seeing him. But I'll just give a sort of, not a collective 6,000 people chanting his name, but from my point of view, on Saturday, seeing him do that workout on that pitch, I was sad for him. I was actually sad for him. I felt sad. I almost wanted to, and I'm not 10, so I didn't shout over the barriers into the empty stadium. But I almost wanted to say, keep going, Aaron. We all love you. It was almost sad for him to be out there, because I've never seen a more intense post-game workout. I've seen the things where, you run new subs up and down the pitch 10 times and give them a little bit of a run out. But this was a proper workout with, 3 or 4 coaches involved. And I just felt sorry for him, because the way I look at it is what Arteta has done to him in terms of just dragging that carpet out from under his feet. If you're going to do that to someone, and I'm not going too far here, you shattered his world. You have shattered his world. If you're going to do that, I want to see 10, 15, 20% difference. You can't just do it for what Arteta says is marginal gains that no one has been able to explain yet. Now, at the end of the season, we might be able to explain it and say, he got that one right. And let's be honest, most of the time he does. Most of the time, when Arteta does something left field, it comes off. And that's a big quality. But to have shattered Aaron Ramsdale's world, I want to see a complete difference. And I'm not seeing it yet. So in my mind, something really bad has happened to someone that we all grew to love last season for no reason.
Do you think sorry, mate, do you think there's something to be said for culture, in the sense that Aaron Ramsdale is someone that we as fans absolutely adore? I think he embodies what you want from an Arsenal player in terms of everything from, his interactions at away grounds to the stuff he does for the club, even to signing his new contract in the summer, which he's probably thinking twice about now. Do you think that side of things is arguably more important than David Raya making a million passes out from the back?
I mean, Mikel Arteta knows 100 times, 1,000 times more about football and the way he wants to play than me. And if he's saying yes at the moment, then I have to respect that. I don't see it with my naked eye. So I have to say no, because there's another aspect to this. I clamoured for years for when Arsene Wenger lost his ruthless streak, that we should have accountability throughout the squad and nobody should feel that they have a place guaranteed, or that they can decide, pick and choose when to turn up for games. And in his last 10 years, sporadically, that happened a lot. That happened a lot. So back then, I was clamouring for some kind of consequence, competition for places. So I can't argue with the fact that Mikel Arteta has now put into the minds of every single player in that squad. You can sign new contracts. The fans can love you. You can perform 7 and 8 out of 10 every single week. And I do believe that Ramsdale did. He had a few games where you could point to mistakes, but you can count them on one hand. And keepers will always have that one hand's worth of mistakes all year. But now you're looking at it and saying, okay, I really want you to show me more, because you've sent shockwaves through that squad. You really have. And if you think that there was a net benefit of doing that, and we all see it eventually, then fair play. That's another amazing decision early on in your managerial career. I think he might have just got this one wrong, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Ramsdale is still a very young keeper, and it's interesting that he, of the candidates that were in for the Ballon d'Or, he was the youngest goalkeeper there. And it's crazy that we've got one of the best goalkeepers in the world sitting on our bench. There was a report that came out the other day that we'll look to sell him come the end of the season. I mean, I think it was from the Sun, so I don't know how much I'm going to read into that. But we were talking about him as being a 60 million plus pound goalkeeper in the summer. I mean, if he doesn't play between now and the end of the season, if he was to go to someone like a Chelsea, who, are the rumoured favourites for him, how much money do you think we can extract from this deal?
Not a strong point of mine, the value of players after contracts, but the fact he signed the contract obviously puts his value up into the tens of millions. And it is very strange, because we've sort of made it that we will need to sell him to maybe balance books elsewhere. I'd probably see it as a swap deal or a loan deal that eventually becomes a permanent deal if it works out for all parties. I mean, it's similar to the Raya deal. The Raya deal's not a permanent deal, is it? Which obviously means that Ramsdale will have one Premier League start in November, you'd have thought. So that is ahead of the transfer window opening and his possible departure from the club, which would be a really sad thing. A really, really sad thing. I'll tell you one thing that Arteta could do. I know he's got 100 things on his in tray every single day, and let's be. I want to say this: he gets most of them right. This isn't a dig at Arteta over this one thing, but the one thing I would do is get the social media team at the club involved in bringing Raya's personality out, so that the love can be there for him as well as Ramsdale. Because at the moment, and I've been in sort of away ends and home ends where Raya does something wrong, and it's almost like we hate him. And he doesn't deserve to have the byproduct of the Ramsdale decision affecting whether or not we love him as a player, because I haven't seen him speak. I haven't seen him involved in social media videos. I want to see Arteta say he could be a nicer guy as Aaron Ramsdale, and let's bring him out a bit so that the fans aren't on his back as much, because it was so weird in that City game when there were people actually sort of outright standing up and shouting at players, which I would never ever do at any game, but that was happening, and that was a strange thing. And I think they can bring out his personality a bit more and show that it's a footballing decision, but you can learn to love all the players equally.
I do wonder if Raya maybe plays a part in that, though. When I saw his first interview with Arsenal, he did strike me as very reserved, very excited to be at the club. Yeah, it might be a case of, they are trying to push these things towards him. But, you've worked with footballers. I've worked with footballers. We all know if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it unless they're really, really pushed into it or have obligations to. But if it's Arsenal's media team, I could very easily see him just saying, look, no, I don't want to do it. But if, they make the case that it would give him a bit more connection with the fans, because, there is no chant for him. There are no real cheers for him. But I would say when he came up to the North Bank at the weekend, he did get a very big applause, I think, which is worth noting. But look, Alan, we've done close to 50 minutes. Really appreciate you coming on. I realise we're doing this probably in your lunch break, so I want to give you a chance to have a sandwich or something. What is your score prediction going into tomorrow?
I'll stick with the 2-2. As I say, I think it'll be an attacking game. I think there'll be lots of goals. I think their individual quality will get them 2. Our overall squad quality will get us 2, and hopefully we can win it on penalties. And talking of penalties, I should have been completely ahead of the fact that Fulham did knock out Tottenham on penalties, even though you said it just before I got it wrong that they were still in it. But they're actually on course if they go out of the FA Cup in the first round for a sort of, is it a 40 game season, which would be incredible. So that's a real worry, isn't it, that Tottenham might have this very low game.
Well, look, mate, it's a long season. Going out in the first round of the League Cup, potentially going out in the first round of the FA Cup and finishing outside the top 4. I mean, Big Ange has done it again, eh? Before we go, mate, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, it's just my name there with underscore after the Alan and an underscore after the Alger. Alan _ Alger _.
Lovely stuff. Make sure you follow Alan on social media. Does some fantastic pieces on there. Very, very good opinions. And yeah, hopefully we can get you on the show a couple of more times throughout the season, mate.
Yeah, love to, Cookie. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. So from myself, from Alan, hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you subscribe, hit a like if you're watching on YouTube, download across all the various social media platforms, and we will be back very, very soon. See you later, guys. Up the Arsenal.